His in-ring career lasted a mere 13.5 years, spanning from September 1989 to March 2003. And yet, it feels like Stone Cold Steve Austin's time as a transcendent and influential star in professional wrestling has been eternal. More than 20 years have passed since that first tidal wave of celebratory beers, middle fingers, flagrant law-breaking, and whoop-ass cans by the bucket load. And yet, it still feels like at any moment the glass could shatter and all hell could be on the verge of breaking loose. In less than 14 years as an active wrestler, Steve Austin carved out a legacy that has spawned inspiration and imitation, but never once duplication. I'm Jack from Cultaholic.com, and this is the captivating career of Stone Cold Steve Austin. In his early 20s, Austin and his friends would attend wrestling events at the Sportatorium in Dallas on the weekends, while working as a forklift operator for the freight company Watkins Motor Lines. However, upon learning that gentleman Chris Adams was starting a wrestling school in the area, Austin signed up, and before long, he became Adams' star protege. He made his debut later in 1989 for the dying World Class Championship Wrestling, defeating journeyman worker Frogman LeBlanc inside the very Sportatorium where Austin had long been a spectator. At the time, Austin admits that Adams had not smartened him up to kayfabe and that the match would have been disastrous had it not been for referee Tony Falk talking him through it. Austin worked the match under his real name of Steve Williams, which wasn't going to work long term due to the fame of Oklahoma powerhouse Dr. Death Steve Williams. It was Dutch Mantel, the future Zeb Coulter, who rechristened the rookie with the Austin surname, which has remained part of his professional identity in the near 30 years since. When World Class merged with Memphis's Continental program from USWA in 1990, Austin began making waves in a feud with Adams, while being seconded by Adams' ex-girlfriend Jeannie Clark, whom Austin would later marry in 1992. In the spring of '91, Austin responded to a call from Magnum TA on behalf of WCW. After less than 2 years in the business, Austin found himself signing a contract worth $75,000 a year to perform for a national wrestling promotion. That's pretty good going, to be honest. Being seconded by Jeannie, who had now taken the name Lady Blossom, Austin won his first championship mere weeks after his debut with the company, defeating beautiful Bobby Eaton for the TV title, which he would hold for nearly 11 months after. WCW's faith in Austin was such that approximately 4 months after his debut, he was booked to make it all the way to the finals of a tournament to determine a new US champion, losing to the franchise player of the company, Sting. Austin's contract more than doubled in his second year, while he remained very prolific in championship programs. Lady Blossom may have left the company, but Austin gained plenty of new allies in the form of the Dangerous Alliance. The 27-year-old stunning Steve found himself flanked by former opponent Bobby Eaton, as well as Arn Anderson, Larry Zbyszko, and ravishing Rick Rude, along with ringside accompaniment in the form of the fearless Medusa and the always advocating Paul E. Dangerously, or as we now know him, Paul Heyman. The stable really had plans on dominating the WCW title picture, but began to break apart after a bloody loss inside the War Games structure at Wrestle War 92. Shortly after War Games, Austin regained the TV title from Barry Windham, but lost it that September to Ricky the Dragon Steamboat. As the calendar turned to 1993, Austin was under the impression that a major singles push was on the horizon, complete with Harley Race as his manager. Instead, plans changed in the blink of an eye, and Austin found himself tag teaming with Brian Pillman, without much in the way of direction, really. But direction would quickly be found, as the duo had tremendous chemistry and became one of the great short-lived tag teams in wrestling history, the Hollywood Blondes. A 5-month reign as WCW World Tag Team Champions followed, during which the brash young duo famously roasted Ric Flair in a comedy bit known as Flair for the Old. However, the team split apart following the title loss that August, with Pillman out injured and Lord Steven Regal now acting as the surrogate partner of Austin. Pillman returned later that fall, turning babyface once more and feuding with Austin. After dispatching his ex-partner for the time being, Austin then went on to defeat Dustin Rhodes at the '93 Starrcade in a 2 out of 3 falls match to capture the US Championship. Austin went on to hold that belt for 8 months, retaining against the likes of the Great Muta, Johnny B. Bad, and Ricky Steamboat at pay-per-views throughout 1994, before dropping it to Steamboat in a real thriller at Clash of the Champions that August. Sadly, a go-nowhere feud with Hacksaw Jim Duggan followed, after which Austin began to fade from the WCW scene, thanks in part to a tricep injury. While recovering from the injury, which was sustained during a tour of New Japan in the spring of '95, Austin was fired over the phone by WCW Vice President Eric Bischoff. It didn't take long for the venomous Austin to find an outlet for his frustration, as he was welcomed into the fold of the renegade ECW promotion by former manager Paul Heyman. Calling himself Superstar Steve Austin now, the rabble-rousing cast-off mocked both Bischoff and Hulk Hogan in barbed parody promos. At the same time, he found himself working with the likes of Mikey Whipwreck and the Sandman in ECW title bouts. Late in Austin's brief time in ECW, he chopped off his blonde locks, moving a bit closer to his eventually iconic look. Little more than 1 week after being pinned by Sandman in the ECW arena, Austin was wrestling his first WWE matches, defeating Matt Hardy and Scott Taylor, the future Scotty 2 Hottie, when both men were still in the role of enhancement talent. But this wasn't the Texas rattlesnake we were seeing, this was the more understated ringmaster, an icy technician who was gifted the $1 million title by his mentor Ted DiBiase. His first feud of note was against Savio Vega, which led to a rather underrated match at Wrestlemania 12, won by Austin. The ringmaster name, however, did not make it to WrestleMania, as Austin willfully helped to kill it off. The Stone Cold name reared its head in this time, inspired by a documentary he'd watched on a frightening contract killer named Richard the Iceman Kuklinski. As Stone Cold, Austin jettisoned DiBiase following a loss to Vega at the May 1996 In Your House in a Caribbean strap match, and Austin wasn't mourning the $1 Million Man's exodus. In fact, just 1 month later, as a lone wolf, Austin, with a badly gashed lip, won the '96 King of the Ring tournament, easily crushing Jake the Snake Roberts in the finals. In his now iconic coronation speech, Austin mocked Roberts' reliance on religion before growling the famous words, "Austin 316 says I just whipped your ass." The line was pure improvisation, and few would have predicted how much weight it would soon carry. A lack of promo time was now a thing of the past for Austin, whose growling ability to make profane threats to anyone in his path really resonated with a fan base that had long grown tired of family-friendly pro wrestling. This was made even more evident when Austin broke into the home of friend-turned-enemy Brian Pillman, an angle that saw Pillman pull a handgun on Stone Cold. A simultaneous target of his fury was the absent Bret Hart, whom Austin coaxed back into the ring through repeated insults and challenges. The two met at the '96 Survivor Series, where the Hitman barely eked out a victory over a rising star clearly in his peer group. However, Austin got revenge at the '97 Royal Rumble, winning the Rumble match itself illegally, sneaking back into the ring following his own elimination, which the referees missed. In fact, he would dump out Bret Hart for the win, an elimination that would go on to have serious repercussions. Yes, now we head to WrestleMania 13 in Chicago, which played host to one of the most important matches in wrestling history. Austin and Hart locked horns and threw fists in an animosity-filled submission match. Stone Cold ended up losing a ton of blood in the later stages of the brawl, and once he was locked in the sharpshooter, he demonstrated his endless competitive spirit. Hart managed to keep the hold locked on for a technical victory, and then it happened, the infamous double turn. Hart continued to attack a wounded Austin before backing down from special guest referee Ken Shamrock, letting a shocking villainous streak come trickling out. Meanwhile, a blood-soaked Austin hobbled out of the arena under his own power to thunderous cheers and respectful applause. Despite once being the perfect villain himself, changing times and audience tastes cast Austin as the archetypal anti-hero. War against Bret's America-hating Hart Foundation would encompass much of his 1997, as would championship matches of all kinds. He fell short against WWE Champion Undertaker at the Cold Day in Hell pay-per-view, while he and unlikely partner Shawn Michaels captured tag team gold from Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith later that month. But now we reach one of the more tragic turning points of Austin's career. In a match with Owen at that year's SummerSlam for the IC title, Austin's career came flashing before his eyes when a mishap during a modified piledriver broke Austin's neck and nearly paralyzed him. Austin missed about 3 months of action, and in his comeback he worked in short matches for a few months more. With Bret now infamously gone from the scene following the Montreal Screwjob, and WWE clouded with much uncertainty, Austin's star rose even higher, as he handily beat up many of the '98 Royal Rumble entrants in the preceding weeks before winning the match itself for the second year in a row, this time legitimately. Austin's road to WrestleMania ended with the coronation of WWE's biggest star in years, as Mike Tyson, with whom Austin once exchanged words and shoves, counted WWE champion Shawn Michaels down in the main event, giving Austin a long overdue world title reign. A champion is sometimes only as good as his enemies, and Austin soon found his most fitting antagonist. However, the individual who would become Austin's greatest rival wasn't a wrestler, but the boss himself, Vince McMahon. The Monday Night Wars began swinging back into WWE's favor once Austin and McMahon's continuous grudge played out on a weekly basis, as the WWE chairman looked to defeat Austin by any and all means. The likes of Mick Foley and Kane were employed as McMahon's henchmen for hire, but in the months that followed WrestleMania, Austin was only beltless for one day. After dropping the belt in a weird first blood match to Kane at that year's King of the Ring, he quickly regained it one night later on Monday Night Raw. While much of the action in the Attitude Era had a tendency to be a bit frantically helter-skelter, one storyline that was as compelling as it was tightly booked saw Austin set across from The Undertaker in a summer-long rivalry known as the Highway to Hell. Undertaker's character motivations were at times vague, and even left Austin guessing as to whether or not he and half-brother Kane had forged an unholy union bent on getting the title off Stone Cold. The two finally met at SummerSlam inside Madison Square Garden, with Austin narrowly retaining the gold. So Vince McMahon cooked up a more ambitious conspiracy to rob Austin of the belt, and it came with his selection of a more ideal champion, The Rock. An unscrupulous army known as the Corporation was fitted around the former People's Champion, while Austin found himself swimming against a current that included the likes of Big Boss Man, Ken Shamrock, and many others. Stone Cold was screwed out of the '99 Royal Rumble, which was inexplicably won by McMahon himself, but received the title match at WrestleMania 15 against The Rock after McMahon carelessly abdicated his earned title match. Austin would destroy Vince inside a steel cage at the St. Valentine's Day Massacre, although he did win because Big Show was a bit silly, before rolling into WrestleMania and stunning his way to his third world title. Austin would then drop the belt to Undertaker at the infamous Over the Edge pay-per-view in May, before winning it back 1 month later on Monday Night Raw. And no matter what Vince Russo might tell you, this is officially the highest rated segment in the show's 26-year history. As the year wore on, Austin was beset with lingering injuries and took time off to have spinal fusion surgery after being written out following an on-screen vehicular assault. He missed more than 10 months of action but returned later in the year 2000 to reclaim his mojo. He warred with Rikishi and Triple H for their parts in the rundown before going on to win the 2001 Royal Rumble match, making him the only 3-time winner in history so far. Austin found himself once more locking eyes with The Rock, who was by now on Austin's level as a heroic megastar. The WWE title and ultimate bragging rights were at stake come WrestleMania 17. Sorry, WrestleMania X-Seven. In one of the more strongly built title matches there has ever been. Austin insisted that he needed to win this match more than anything, but few knew to what length he would actually go. In a stunner of a less literal sense, Austin enlisted the help of sworn nemesis Vince McMahon in battering Rock into oblivion during the match's closing scenes. He ensured himself a 5th world title and also a heel turn that nobody saw coming. A paranoid, desperate Austin had resorted to selling his soul to the devil. Austin's sudden personality shift led to something similar to a midlife crisis, though McMahon tried coaxing the hell-raising Austin back once WCW began invading their terrain. Austin faked a return to that version of himself before swerving the entire WWE side, revealing himself to be the supreme leader of the Alliance. Stone Cold's challenges came in the form of Kurt Angle, with whom he exchanged the title, and even Alliance ally Rob Van Dam, whose popularity with the fans didn't sit well with Stone Cold. The Alliance was vanquished at Survivor Series 2001, with Austin taking the final pinfall from The Rock, and one night later on Raw, in a convenient sweep, Austin was suddenly positioned as a conquering babyface hero once more. While he was still the demanding leader of the Alliance, a certain character quirk popped up that continues to exist for Austin, to the annoyance of many. Yes, we're talking about the what chance. Even though this began as a way to make a heel Austin more annoying, this actually carried over as a taunt meant to annoy WWE's collection of villains. But it actually took on a life of its own that persists to this day without Austin even being present. Moving into 2002, the Stone Cold that existed was in many ways unfamiliar. He was beltless after dropping the gold to Chris Jericho and became less of a hellraiser and more of a deadpan antagonist, a role that wasn't exactly bringing him much in the way of creative satisfaction. After beating NWO member Scott Hall at WrestleMania 18, Austin briefly walked out of WWE, citing unhappiness with his role. He returned weeks later, feuding with the likes of Undertaker, Ric Flair, and even Eddie Guerrero throughout that spring, but when asked to lose a match with Brock Lesnar on free TV with zero build-up, Austin went home once more, this time without a resolution in sight. Compounding the distressing situation was Austin getting himself into legal trouble after then-wife Deborah claimed that Austin had assaulted her in a domestic incident. At the same time, WWE washed their hands of Austin in a negative editorial on weekend program Confidential. There seemed to be no resurrection for Stone Cold in the offing. After months of maintaining a low profile, Austin re-emerged in WWE in early 2003 after he and Vince McMahon mended fences behind the scenes. Stone Cold went on to trounce Raw GM and former object of his real-life anger, Eric Bischoff, at No Way Out in his return match. However, physically, Austin was not in the greatest shape, and he knew his days as a wrestler were numbered. The following month at WrestleMania 19 in Seattle, Stone Cold had himself one more round, where he put over longtime rival and peer The Rock clean as a sheet, closing the book on one of the most brilliant and historic in-ring careers there has ever been. Since then, Austin has made numerous appearances in non-wrestling roles, whether he's playing the hands-on general manager of Raw that could still dole out stunners to some insubordinate wrestler, or as the guest referee for various high-profile matches. Most infamously, the Battle of the Billionaires at WrestleMania 23. In 2009, Austin accepted induction into WWE's Hall of Fame, and has kept himself busy in the years since. He's acted in various comedies and action movies, as well as hosting his own podcast, The Steve Austin Show, which I'm sure you've heard. However, from time to time, the glass still shatters in WWE venues, and a black shirted Austin arrives in order to raise a little bit of extra hell. There is no denying Austin's place in the highest level of pro wrestling's pantheon, one of the supreme audience draws there has ever been. His skill as both a technically intuitive worker and as a lawless brawler served him well in matches with opponents of various backgrounds. But it's his charisma and personality that drove him further. When it comes to Steve Austin, there's simply no denying that he is one of pro wrestling's greatest of all time, and one of the most indomitable performers there has ever been. And that really is the bottom line. Thanks very much for watching, and let us know what you think in the comments section down below. You can follow Cultaholic on Twitter at Cultaholic and on Facebook at facebook.com/Cultaholic. If you enjoy what we do, then please do check out our Patreon, patreon.com/Cultaholic, where you can pledge. And don't forget, of course, most importantly of all, to hit subscribe and to join us.